Hi everyone, welcome to our second masterclass of our June series on risk management. I'll give everyone a minute just for those people that are still joining, and then we'll get started. But I will welcome Anna again to take us through the rest of the journey around risk. It's such an important part of all of our lives these days, and I'm grateful to have Anna with me again today to help us discuss this topic. Thanks, Anna.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
Okay, before we start, we would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we meet today and pay our respect to elders past and present. As you know, our webinar structure has taken a bit of a different approach where we have the two masterclasses, and then we have our feature and focus, and then we also have our Logic Clinic. So for those who joined our session last week, Anna took us through the risk of medications management, which she showed us how to fully describe, how to look at the consequences, or the potential consequences, how to look at our controls and all of those things. And she briefly touched on the report card that we were going to be able to generate post fully describing this risk. And that's what session 2 today is about. So I'm going to ask Anna in a minute to take us through the rest of those steps on what does that report card really mean to us? What other analytics do we have within the platform that can help us to really look at how we as an organisation can respond to any risks that are escalating. So without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to hand over to Anna, and I look forward to hearing how Anna's going to share that with us. Thanks, Anna.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Great to be focusing on risk. So I'll just share the screen. And as always, we're using the demonstration site. And I will just go back, just in case people didn't have a chance to attend last week, because this really is a continuation of it. We were focused on risk, and as Elizabeth said, we used medication risk management by way of example. And what we were looking at is how to set up a risk. So for those of you who want to go through this all in detail, you can see the recording. And once we were through all of that, we then went to, on the risk register, we moved over to look at the report card. And the report card provided us, again using the same example, provided us with an insight into what we've got in place to improve our mitigation strategies, and then what we've got in place to control it. So we were looking at things like, well, we've got audits and we've got documents, for instance, and contracts, but we've also got a number of incidents occurring, and we looked at that in detail in terms of saying that really represents the exposure, whereas these things represent controls. So these are the things that we're either putting in place or have in place to control the risk. And that's where we were up to last week. This week, we wanted to look at the analytics. So this is taking it to a new level. And so for that, I'm going to go down to the bottom here into analytics. And you'll see that analytics has changed now. And so that we're stepping through for each of the registers and we're choosing governance. And so these are the analytics that are available for the governance registers. And you'll see that we've got one specialised one for risk. So as you look through, you can see that there's others here for instance, accreditation, assets and contracts. But this is where we're heading to. And we click on this here. And you can see that you've got another option here. We could look at this in terms of a period greater than 30 days. And so you can see all of these options. So if you're walking into a meeting and the meeting meets every month, then you're going to be right for the default setting. The default setting saying, okay, well, I'll show you what's changed since the last 30 days. But if you're walking into a meeting and that meeting only meets, let's say, quarterly, then choose the 90, and that will now give us a report card based on what's changed since the last time we looked at it. So this is really important. So you can see that you can push it out right out to 3 years. So let's have a look at what the report card can provide you. So in the first instance, what it's showing you is for all of the risks that you have on the risk register, based on the matrix that you have, and remembering this matrix can be customized. This is just the matrix that's in the demonstration site. But based on your matrix and based on where you have assessed your current risks, and we're talking about the control risk rating, not the uncontrolled. I might just show you that. I'll just replicate this here, just coming back to over on the risk register, and let's just look at this one by way of example. When I'm looking at this, the variable that you're seeing, sorry, wrong tab. The variable that we're looking on the report card is this one, the control. So as you know, that this is the uncontrolled, and this is where we want to get to. So that's the controlled rating, and that's the most important rating because that's saying that's where we are now. And so when we're back over here, it's defaulting to showing you where your risks sit in terms of how much you've controlled them. So you can see that we've got 2 in, or actually 3 in the extreme. So this is the red. One sitting as a major and a likely, and then we've got one that's sitting as an unlikely and a severe, and one sitting as a rare and severe. So this is just giving you the layout. Now, one of the things that I want to also point out up here is that if you were looking at the risk register from a particular dimension, you can say, well, I only want to look at it in the context of strategic, and that'll actually now generate the risks that you've got on the register that are falling into that dimension of strategic and where they sit. If we have a look at that filter, you can also say, well, I was looking at it for just a particular business area. And let's say I'm looking at it just in terms of clinical governance, and apply that. And that'll give you your perspective on that area. So useful to think about when you're coming in to tailor it to meet your needs. I'll just take that filter off. So we're back with all of them. So what we're looking at here is the heat map over the last 90 days. We're actually asking it, where do all the control ratings sit? And so that you can gain that perspective. Obviously, the ones that you're going to want to have conversations around are maybe not the unlikelies and the rares, but maybe the possibles, but certainly the likelies. So these ones, these actually are helping you to really have a look. And if anything was up here in the uncertains, almost certain, you'd certainly want to be having a conversation. So if we're looking at clinical governance, so let's have a look at that again. Just put that business area. Yep, clinical governance. Let's do that. It's useful to have a context. So again, great. Nothing's almost certain, but certainly if you only had 20 minutes to talk about risk, you're not going to be talking about the ones that are possible. The ones you're going to be talking about are the likelies, and those two there. But let's have a look at what else we can see on this screen. And I'm going to one more time take that filter off. Okay. We've got all of the risks. Now, imagine if we were now talking to the executive team, and the executive team aren't looking at any particular area. They want to look at the whole of the organisation, so the whole enterprise. And what you're getting from this lower screen down here is where the default is providing them with an overview of what's changed in the last 90 days. And that's particularly important. Now, it's defaulting to showing them that we've got a current controlled rating of high, and 90 days ago it was also high. So we have had no change on that one. If we click here, we'll see which ones, it'll just show us which ones have changed. So this one has moved from a high, it was previously medium, and now it's high. And you can see now it's really important to sort of start talking about that one. Why is that one higher? What's caused that level to increase? And how that has changed is, if I just come back to this tab here, that the risk manager, when they're looking at this risk, have had a look at the risk. And there's a couple of things that you could do as a risk manager. Coming down to your advanced areas here, if you're starting to see that that you've got an increase in the number of incidences or adverse events that occurred, and you can see that you can go across here and it'll pull up all of them. If you can see that's occurring, that you might want to think now about changing the risk rating. And so you might say, well, it previously, let's say, it was unlikely and medium, but now when you're looking at the range of events that are occurring, you're really thinking, wow, this has moved really more to a possible. And even if it's more possible but still medium, even that's a useful thing to know. Now we know that it's more likely to occur, but possibly it's going to be the same level. So we're increasing the likelihood, and we know that we're increasing. There's justification for increasing that because we've actually had a series of incidences over the last week or two, let's say, and there's nothing's changed. Everything is, we haven't put any risk mitigation strategies in. And last week we had 6 events. Why wouldn't we have 6 more? Everything's exactly the same. So this is your way as a risk manager of indicating that there are changes that are happening, and it might be because things are becoming more possible, or it might be going the other way. Hey, we're actually had a significant reduction in the likelihood of a significant deduction in the number of events occurring, which has brought us down to that level. So this is really for risk managers to be actually using these levers to indicate to the executive team, the higher management teams, about what's changing in your environment in relation to risks that you're managing. So if we go back to the report card, you can see over here that what we've got over here is a whole range of managers are actually have indicated that we've got an increase. And over here you can see that it's indicating that the likelihood remained the same, but the consequences increased. So depending on which way you move on the matrix, whether you're increasing the likelihood or you're increasing the consequences, so you're moving from, in this instance, you're moving this way. So if something's no longer now going to have moderate consequences, it's going to have major consequences, or the likelihood, it's more possible that it's occurring, so it's moving from an unlikely to a possible. Those things, as risk managers change, what it's indicating here. Now, the purpose of all of this is to really help the executive team to focus on where they need to be having the conversation. We don't want to be talking about risks where there's been no change. If there's no change, then really, if we've only got limited time to talk about things, what we want to talk about is where have we got changes occurring. So it's really critical that risk managers, if you're managing a risk, that as events are increasing or decreasing, that you're changing the control rating so that you're able to communicate to the executive team what's happening in the context of risk for the organisation. So if we scroll down, you can see that this organisation, it's just a demonstration site, of course, but you can see we've had no change on a range of things. And if we scroll up, you can see that we've got these changes here. So these are the ones that, as I said, we'd want to be having conversations about. Now, something that this is the default setting, and I know you all know that you can tailor Logic. There's a little ellipsis over here, really super useful. Click there, and this can start to begin. Well, why don't I, if I'm on the executive team now and I've seen that there are these changes that are happening in the risk environment, but I want to know more about them, but I don't want to drop down into each of them, because if I drop down into each of these, I'm going to be lost in the detail. I really want to keep at this level. So what you can do is you can change this default setting to say, talk to me about the contributing factors and give me a description of this risk so we all have an understanding of it, and who's owning this or who's managing this risk. So all of a sudden now what we've got here is the executive team are able to bring information into this view. Again, if we go back to this view here, when you're on the risk register, let's just have a look at it. I just want to show you something. When you're using this filter over here, we can't extract contributing factors out of this. This is a filter that you can use, as you know, to highlight things on the screen, and you can't pull out those details. So if you are looking for those details, where you can pull them out is from here. So you can actually just pull this ellipsis and you can click whichever ones you want, like the target risk ratings, or what do we want as a target, and which business area does this relate to. You can also overload it with too much information. But one of the things that you can do is if you scroll up here, you can export the data. And when you export that data, that's going to export all of this data here. So if you want the complete view, then certainly you're going to come along here and use the ellipsis, and not sure, it's just must be sitting in that. Not sure why that's not, must be my view for some reason. So I'm just change the screen size. Not sure why. There it was, that little help icon was choosing to be a problem. Yeah, you can click on all of these if you'd like, and then use the export button. But as I said, what we're really looking at here is we're trying to do the executive team, and now with the analysis of a risk and looking at if these are changing, then what are the things that could be, and it could be in the contributing factors. I might just stop there, Elizabeth, in case there's questions.
And I don't have any questions at the moment, but the one thing that I've just want to reiterate from a Logiqc perspective is that what we thought is one report in analytics has, over the course of your demonstration, turned into about 30 or 40 different reports. If we just utilise our filters and we look at the ellipsis on the information that we can share. So whilst you think it's only a risk heat map report, it's so much more if you look at the way that you've set up to look at where the changes was within the different rating, and then all of the additional information that we can bring into that report.
Yeah, so if wanted to just a brief, here's our dimensions, our risk categories, obviously the name of the risk. Let's leave the control, changes in the last 30 days. Let's leave that out. Let's leave the targeting because that's telling us where we want to get to. Yeah, let's definitely have a description of the risk and contributing factors. So really useful, I think, in terms of providing, if you need to provide a report. So if I just come up to here and export that. See, it'll just take a minute. The other nice thing about these reports is that on the first page, they provide you with the chart, and on the second page, they provide the detail. So remember, filter beforehand so that you can, what you're showing them is, if we're looking at clinical governance, this is what it looks like. And then on the second page would be all of the risks that are associated with clinical governance, for instance. Yes. So I think what if you're of the mantra that risk drives strategy, then I think what it means is that if you're the risk manager for, let's say you're the HR manager and you're managing this risk. So here I am back over on the risk register. And it really means that if we're heading towards executive meeting next week, one of the things that as the HR manager, I might want to come in and just check all of the ratings that I got and have a look to see whether I think that there needs to be any changes in this control level. Remembering that how I can see them, if I just keep scrolling down, if I'm confident that the reporting culture is working, that people are reporting things, and I can see those 6 things, or I go, and if this is my risk, I might also come over to, I'll just make sure I've got the right one. Is this human resource, lack of insufficient skills? Where I would want to go is over to here, click on that risk and generate the report card. And this is what I can do here is actually say, show me just over the last 30 days. That's going to give me an indication that these are the incidences I've had in the last 30 days, and this is the feedback. Now, I think I mentioned last week, but remember that when feedback is attached to a risk, only complaints. It's got the intelligence to know that if we've got positive feedback, it won't be attached to a risk. So these are all complaints that have come through. So in the last 30 days, we've had 3 incidences and we've had 3 feedback. Now, if as a HR manager, you feel that is indicating a change in the control, so let's have a look at the controls. So coming back to the risk register and coming back to here, let's have a look at what we've got in the controls. Sorry. Really annoying when I open the wrong tab. I'm wanting to look at the assessment. So we're saying it's likely and it's medium. And if we'd had a look at what those incidences were and what those complaints were, we might say, yeah, it's only there. But if we're saying it's actually more possible, then we might push it to there. And that's now going to reflect as a change for the executive team, saying that we're looking at it's more possible that this risk will occur. Still left with a minor rating, but it's more possible. And that's where management, if they're sort of saying, let's use risk to drive strategy, what do we need to change? What do we need to focus on? It's the risk managers that are actually giving direction to where that change should occur, because they're changing the control rating. And they're either changing it in terms of likelihood or they're changing it in terms of consequences. And so it could be something that as each manager is heading towards the executive team, that they would go to their area of the risk register. And you could do it from this tab here and just sort of say, well, I'm the HR manager, so I'm only looking at risks that relate to, I think I can get it from here, all the HR ones. And so these are the ones that I would be looking for, saying, is there any change that I need to give, I need to indicate to top management in terms of changing that control rating? And it's this one where it's going to surface for the management, for the executive team. They'll be advised that there's been a change, and it'll indicate what type of change it is. So, Elizabeth, have we got a question?
Anna, I've got two questions. The first question is, if you are the HR manager and you have now looked at those 3 incidents that happened and the 3 complaints that you received over the 35 days, with that, and you've reassessed that risk and you thought that it is now become more possible, is that also where you would put in additional mitigating strategies that you might think is going to be helpful to further mitigate that risk and bring it back down so that the exec can see what your proposals are?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So this is where you would sort of think one of your things as a risk manager is actually is to change these things. And of course, if you're changing it where the organisation is more exposed and you're the risk manager, your whole thing is to try and stop it from actually breaching whatever the threshold is. So if we come down to here, we've set it at 10 and we're at 6. Now, Logic's going to remind the risk manager when it gets to 80%, which would be 8. But if you're looking at this monthly, and it's in the last month, we've had 3 of these, which we just looked at, and we had 3 complaints. That's just in the last month. Then certainly you might be thinking, well, I've got to, my whole modus operandi in managing this risk is to manage it. It's not to let it pop. Now, if we let it for another month, it will pop, because what's changed? Maybe something changed, but we'll go from 6 to 9. Maybe if we have 3 events, we'll go 6 to, oh, well, we had 6 in the last month, so that would pop it. So what you're trying to do, and so what Elizabeth's indicating there, is that you would actually press this button here to say, what could I do to reduce this chance of this event occurring again, or these types of events? And this is where you would fill it out and say, why don't we provide training, or let's actually review our procedures, or let's look at let's clarify delegations, whatever it is that's causing those events to occur. You'd be wanting to sort of say, let's put in some mitigation. What I want to look at just for that is, I wonder if we could tell the executive team what mitigation. So I'm just going to come back to this ellipsis. It's this one here. Yeah, just useful for that to occur. I'm just going to look for whether the mitigation strategies could come onto here. And they're not on there. So I think that could be something that we could actually ask the dev team, because I think it would be useful, as you say, Elizabeth, if this is information we want to impart to the executive team, what are we doing about it? Is that what we would want on this report is the mitigations. So that was a good question. Have you got a second one?
Yeah, we've just got a question. So if you can just again show how to get to the report card that's not editable. So where we can't make any changes, essentially the card that we can share with the exec that shows how we are currently managing that.
Okay, so I'll just take all of the filters off. So when you come into the risk register, you'll see that this is where you do the heavy lifting. This is where you identify and fully describe the risk. Where I've been going to when I want to generate the report card is here, and there's one report for every risk. So you'll see that when I move from these two tabs, all of this information remains the same. So it's exactly the same. It's just there's a different I'll just just different layout, but you can see medication, lack of insufficient skills. So if I go there, you'll see that it's exactly the same. So for every identified risk, there is a risk management plan. And when you open that up, it's trying to sort of step back from all of the detail and go, okay, this is what we're talking about. This is how we're currently controlling it. So again, if you've put more things in place, remember to add those details to the controls, because this is where people can go to get a bird's eye view of the risk. This is where they can see what you're doing to mitigate it. And then these are the controls that you've linked over on that other thing that you're saying that you're actually controlled. And this one here is tracking exposure. Just one thing I'll point out with this risk, this here, it's pointing to, it defaults to 365 days because it was set up to sort of say, hey, do we want a report card on a risk as we head into the planning process every year? Let's give a 365 report. But you can actually stretch it. You can actually change that variable. So if you actually are sort of have done a whole range of things and you want to look at it for 30 days, how clean is it over the last 30 days? And if you stretch it to 60 days, now we'll pick up on all of what it looked like 30 days before that. So you might have done a lot of things. So that's 60 days. And so we can see all of the audits. But the thing is the incident. So in the last 60 days, we've had 5 events. Mm-hmm. If we stretch it to 30 days, it's the same 5. So it's all of those 5 events have happened in the last 30 days. So useful for that. Yep.
I don't have any more questions, but I have a comment. The flexibility in the analytics makes this very valuable. Being able to export is a great feature. Thank you for the updates.
Yeah, I agree. That was it's and the thing is, it's hidden. So what we're talking about here is if you come down, it's in governance. Remember, because it's one of the governance. There's only one. It's the risk map, but it's just that hidden little ellipsis. I think we should have it. It should be more obvious, but there it is. Where you can just click on and for what you want, and then use the export, which will bring the chart with it on that first tab. So I think this is really sort of, I think, this is a really, this is really about middle management talking to top management. That's how I see it. It's about middle management saying, I've got things to manage and I'll manage them. And so how I'll communicate to top management will be via my risks. And as we looked at before with those HR risks, if I'm the HR manager, I'd bring them up, and then I would, before the executive meeting, coming into here and looking at these things here and saying, is this where I think it belongs? And if I think it's really more likely now, but it's still a minor, I'm going to move it to there. I think this is almost certain, and that should indicate to the executive team that this is something that we need to have a conversation about.
Thank you, Anna. I think that's great. And we've got some further commentary saying how extremely helpful the risk heat map is and how that's going to start driving some conversations in their risk discussion. So I think it was really, really timely in June for us to have this conversation about risk as we look what next year can bring us. So thanks, Anna. Thank you for going over that. And just a reminder, everyone, that next week we're going to have a feature and focus, and that will focus on the risk dashboard and how that can put all the information that Anna shared with us today into a dashboard, so you can have that at a quick glance as well. So please, if you haven't registered for next week, please join us so we can talk about that in more detail. And then week 4, of course, once you've now gone and reviewed all of your reports and all of your risks, bring those issues that you may be experiencing to the clinic so we can help you resolve them. Really grateful to have Anna with me, as always. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great day.
Ciao.